You mentioned a low inflammatory diet. Obviously, a carnivore diet is very low inflammation because you're eliminating everything that could possibly be. But what are some of the other priorities if somebody isn't going to do, super strict carnivore? What things should they be looking out for? Is it mostly just ultra processed foods, or are we talking about, again, things like oxalates and other plant toxins?
So it seems to be the two big heavy hitters are the carbohydrates and seed oils. And that's just across the board for everything anyway. Like we know that processed foods are super highly inflammatory because of the refined carbohydrate. And seed oils are just super inflammatory and really do contribute to unhealthy fat cells. So, some people will say, I went on an anti-inflammatory diet, and so I cut out bread and candy and fried foods. Like, okay, that's a great idea, but like really what they're doing there is they're cutting out seed oils and they're cutting out processed foods and they're cutting out sugar. And so they're doing like a whole foods diet without saying that they're doing a whole foods diet. So I don't know that, I don't know the science about oxalate and lipedema enough to say. I chatted with Sally once and she said there is a correlation between like unhealthy fat cells and oxalate. I don't know. I don't remember enough about it to speak about it. But a carnivore diet to me is really like the best anti-inflammatory diet. So, that I love that. But in reality, I don't think cucumbers are inflammatory, and I don't think, lettuce or avocado is inflammatory. So probably those things can be included, also.
Cool. No, that's great. I love that explanation. And it's nice. I hope it's hopeful for listeners to hear that and think like, okay, this isn't my life sentence. There are things I can do. Like you said, like even if it's just stop the progression, let alone make it get better, that's at least something. So I think that's very helpful. Another hot take you threw in there is the higher protein, not so high version or not so high fat version of a carnivore diet. This is again a bit of a hot take. See people out there who promote a carnivore diet and you see them eating like literally just chomping on butter all day and that kind of a thing. I'm firmly planted on the fence on this one, exactly 50-50. So tell us a little bit about your experience with, understanding that a carnivore diet should be high fat. You should eat fatty meat, which is the way you started, but then understanding like, wait a second, maybe this is a little bit too much of that energy component, like you said, and maybe not enough of the protein component.
Right. So what I like to do is I sort of say like, okay, well, what is the minimum and then where is the maximum? And so I go and I will reference back to say what Maria and Craig Emmerich call out as a PSMF. That is the highest protein. That is a protein sparing modified fast. You would do this like for a day or 2 days in a week. And what is that? That would give you the protein that you need to repair cells and build muscle, and the fat that you need to have healthy hormones, but it's in place of like a water fast. So it's a very low calorie thing, but you've got to have this minimum of 30 grams of fat in order to still, maintain your hormone health. You would do that like once a day. So 30 is like, bare minimum of fat. That's like when you're like a bodybuilder and you go down to like, this fat-free diet and you're cutting like crazy, you go 30. But where is the maximum? Some people get up to, they're talking about 80% of their calories from fat in unlimited calories. You can be talking about 3,000 or 4,000 calories, and 80% of that coming from fat is a lot of fat. I mean, I don't have a calculator to do the math, but it's a lot of fat. For me, I did not enjoy protein sparing modified fast days. I don't do it. I find that for me, my minimum is like 80 grams of fat or 90 grams of fat. I'm even more comfortable. And that is enough for me I can tell like I'm not cranky, I'm not angsty, I don't have like anxiety, and I'm satisfied. And I fill in with protein to an extent where I'm at more like, instead of the 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, some people say per lean or some people say per total body weight, instead of 0.8, I like a 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight is how it sort of works out for me. But it all comes from your energy expenditure, how big you are, how much mass you're moving during the day, right? We need a certain amount of calories to sort of live our lives. And if we are wanting to lose weight, calorie deficit still works. And there's another point of argument where, for me and some other carnivores now, to start talking about calories matter is just huge, because we were always the opposite of calories in, calories out. We were like, no, it's about insulin. It's about keeping carbohydrates down, and then you won't have to worry about calories. What happens when you do that and you eat sticks of butter all day is you just run the risk of consuming too much energy for what you need. And so there were a lot of people who went down the sticks of butter or brown butter or nothing but, ribs, chunks of fat. They went down that route, and then all of a sudden they were like, I don't know what happened. I was doing high fat carnivore like always, and I gained 30 pounds. It's like, no, you weren't doing it like always. You were really forcing the fat because it was trendy, and it's just too much fat when there are people out there that have that fat on their bodies to lose. So, not speaking about myself, but speaking generally, not people with lipedema, but general people with general overweight, they need dietary fat. They can get that fat from what they're eating, or they can get that fat from their bodies. Now, if you're consuming carbohydrate and dosing with carbohydrate all day long, you're not going to have access to that fat, right? But if you keep generally low insulin, you'll have access to that fat. But if you keep shuttling in fat, that fat has to get processed, it has to get stored, and so you will gain weight. So at this point now, I've seen in the last few months, people, actually, I'd say almost about a year, people now are sort of getting it. And it's thanks to, people like Maria, Ted Naiman, Vanessa Spina, Gabrielle Lyon, like talking about protein more and more, that people are understanding the importance of protein. And so what happens is the more protein you try and eat and the more you focus on protein, if you don't reduce the fat, your calories are just going to be like, crazy through the roof if you're trying to pay attention and get to this 80%, and you want to have an appropriate amount of protein and still do 80-20, you're likely going to be over on calories for what you need. And so I think this is where people either they weren't paying attention to calories at all, or they were trying to have increased protein and increased fat and stay at this magical 80-20 ratio. And it's not working out. It did not work out for them. I'm hearing more and more stories every day of more and more people, and every time a post comes up that discusses how things like feasting, priming, and then fasting is not such a great idea. You look at the comments under those posts, and there are stories of people like, yeah, who got really screwed by trying that approach. And so hopefully now people will sort of get their wits about them and understand that calories still matter. And sometimes the people talking about that calories don't matter are, number one, they're really large people, tall people. They're people who have not ever had metabolic issues. They're in great shape with large amounts of muscle mass. I mean, super large guys are talking about how calories don't matter, and then if you just eat until, satiety, you'll be fine. But these are people who are really great at, burning calories. And so for somebody who's half the size, like a small woman who's half the size of like a large, 6-foot man, things are going to work a little bit differently. You may not find satiety until you've actually overeaten, if you're trying to do high fat carnivore.